Mhm. You know, I spent some time going through the treaties of the United States. Yeah. Mhm. The treaties discussed in this handbook are almost exclusively multilateral treaties deposited with the Secretary General of the United Nations. Yes. Now, since at the time of 1981 there were 500 multilateral treaties, and they were on deposit, yes, with the Secretary General of the United Nations. I thought for sure that we were violating numerous treaties. Now, I'm wanting to sue this state, yes, every state, which the United States, and quite possibly the United Nations for refusing to obligate the enforcement of treaties that happen to be on deposit at the international headquarters in New York. Mhm. The Vienna Convention of the Law of Treaties between the states and international organizations or between international organizations. Yes. Mm. Now, as the public court record shows, I was never given any notice or opportunity to be heard. Yes. When issuing the dissolution of marriage from the state of Washington. I wasn't given an actual dissolution of marriage. Yes. I don't think the stipulation in the order from Guam was included. Yes. And I don't think the state of Washington courts have the actual regulations necessary to dissolve a United Nations marriage certificate. So for the idiots in the employed, idiots, idiots in the employment of the state of Washington, yes, you cannot regulate the contact between myself and my wife, yes, unless there exists the regulations necessary to dissolve a United Nations marriage, yes. Now I told you that, and you thought, well, we're going to do it anyway, and then we're not going to give him a copy. Yeah, we're going to arrest him multiple times right now. Now, there's what's known as the depository. Yes, this is very important when looking through the various treaties of the United States. The depository, yes. In the past, when a multilateral treaty provided for its subsequent ratification, accession, etc., yes, the states concerned, as in the case of bilateral agreements, exchanged the appropriate instruments. But the proliferation of multilateral treaties, yes, and the increase in the number of parties have resulted in the development of the institution of the depository. Yeah. Now, initially, only states were depositories. Then, particularly since the establishment of the League of Nations, and later the United Nations and its specialized agencies, international organizations, which have been increasingly entrusted with depository functions. Now, the Secretary General of the United Nations hereinafter, yes, 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 is the depository of over 500 multilateral treaties spanning the spectrum of human activity. The depository of a treaty is any state, organization, or institution to whom the custody of the treaty is entrusted. The functions of the depository are elaborated in Articles 76 and 77 of the Vienna Convention, 1969. Now, I want to know the depository, yes, of every treaty, agreement, and convention of every nation of the world. Yes, the GPS location, right, and the communication systems right now. Because I'm not only going to sue this state for taking my sons, which I'm going to sue this state for violating any treaties, agreements, and conventions, inclusive of humanitarian rights, civil rights, civil liberties, privileges and immunities, and any and all violations of international law that I have available to me. Now, the designation of the depository. Yes, yes, yes. Normally, the treaty itself clearly designates the depository in a separate provision. But for the sake of clarity and certainty, this would clearly be the preferred approach. The Stockholm Convention on Persistent Organic Pollutants of 2001. The Secretary of the United Nations shall be the depository of the convention. Also, Article 53 of the International Cocao. Agreement 2001 says Secretary General of the United States is hereby designated as the depository of the agreement. Now, since these treaties, yes, known as the International Convention for the Suppression of the Financing of Terrorism, 1999, yes, the original of this convention, of which is Arabic, English, French, Russian, and Spanish texts, are equally authentic, shall be deposited with the Secretary General of the United Nations. Yes. Now, I know you're thinking the Secretary General of the United Nations, yes, in his personal office, in a file cabinet in the corner, yes, has a copy of all these conventions and treaties of the United Nations. But more than likely, there's multiple individuals in the employment of the actual office of the